20 specialists failed the CEO. Snow struck the tall windows of Greystone House in dry little clicks, like fingernails tapping for permission to enter. At the center of the library, Celeste Avery sat beneath a portrait of the father she had not spoken about in years while a stranger in a worn work jacket held one of her medical films toward the firelight. 20 specialists had studied versions of that image. 20 respected names had reached the same conclusion. 30 years in a wheelchair. No meaningful function below the injury. No reason to hope for anything different. But Jonah Reed was not a doctor, and he was not looking at her body. He was looking at a number printed in the corner of the film, a number that should have matched the report in his other hand. It did not. By midnight, the single father would uncover the lie that had shaped almost every day of Celeste's life. But before we begin, tap like if you believe the truth can survive even when powerful people bury it. And tell me in the comments who taught you never to accept an easy answer when something important feels wrong. 6 days earlier, Jonah had arrived at Greystone House in a truck that sounded as if it had swallowed a toolbox. The truck was 14 years old, dark blue under the salt and road dust, with a passenger side mirror held steady by a strip of black tape that he replaced every few months. It was not impressive, but it started in cold weather, carried every instrument he owned, and had enough room behind the front seat for his 7-year-old daughter, Piper, to sit with her backpack, a library book, and the small red lunchbox she refused to outgrow. On that Monday morning, the truck rolled through wrought iron gates and up a drive lined with bare elms. Greystone House appeared slowly through the snow, first as a roofline, then as pale stone walls, then as a mansion so large it seemed less built than declared. Jonah knew the property by reputation. Everyone in the Chicago restoration trade did. The house had been constructed by a rail magnate, expanded by a steel heir, and bought 22 years earlier by Thomas Avery, founder of North Star Dynamics. The company made industrial controls, medical sensor components, and the kind of invisible hardware that kept expensive systems from failing. After Thomas died, his daughter turned North Star into a global company. Jonah knew that part too. He knew Celeste Avery had become chief executive at 27. He knew she had survived 3 hostile takeover attempts, removed 2 corrupt division heads, and once ended a negotiation by standing up from the table only in the figurative sense. Because Celeste had not stood from any chair since she was 14, the accident had happened 30 years ago on an icy road in Wisconsin. Her father had been driving. Celeste had been in the back seat. The newspaper accounts were brief and respectful. Thomas had walked away with a broken wrist. His daughter had left the hospital with a spinal injury that every article described as permanent. Jonah had not searched for the details because he was curious. He had searched because the work order mentioned an elevator, a rehabilitation suite, and a legacy building control network installed in stages over 3 decades. Old systems carried history inside them. They also carried mistakes. His phone vibrated as he parked near the service entrance. Piper leaned forward from the back seat. Is that her? Probably the office. Are you late? 2 minutes early. Then don't answer like you're scared. Jonah looked at her in the rearview mirror. She had Hannah's eyes and Hannah's habit of saying the thing most adults spent energy avoiding. I'm not scared. Piper considered him. You did the mouth. What mouth? The one where you press your lips together because money is happening? He almost smiled. Money is always happening. Put your hat on. The plan had been for Piper to spend the day at school, and then with Miss D. Elgato downstairs from their apartment. But school had closed because of the storm, and Mistress Delgado's grandson had woken with a fever. Jonah had called the property manager at Greystone House and explained. The manager had gone silent long enough to make clear what he thought of contractors who arrived with children. Then he had said the repair was urgent. The CEO was already furious, and Jonah could either come now or lose the contract. The contract was worth 3 months of rent. So Piper came too. Jonah answered the phone. Mr. Reed? A woman's voice asked. Yes. You are at the East Service entrance. The equipment failure is in the West Wing. The gate attendant directed me here. He was mistaken. Drive around. Do not cross the front court. The line ended. Piper raised her eyebrows. She sounds happy. That wasn't her. How do you know? Because people like her have other people sound unhappy for them. He drove around. The west entrance opened into a long stone corridor that smelled of cedar polish and cold air. A man in a dark suit met them, with the expression of someone who had already recorded 3 objections and was waiting for a fourth. Mr. Reed, I'm Malcolm Fenn, estate director. Jonah shook his hand. This is my daughter, Piper. Her school closed. She'll stay with me and won't interfere. Malcolm's eyes moved to the red lunchbox, the knitted hat, and the snow gathering around Piper's boots. Ms. Avery does not permit children in the residence during business hours. Then I can leave and return when I have care for her. That may be tomorrow. The estate director's jaw tightened. Somewhere deeper in the house, a mechanical bell sounded twice. The main elevator has stopped between floors 3 times in 48 hours, he said. Ms. Avery has a board delegation arriving Friday. It must be repaired today. Then Piper stays. Malcolm studied him. Jonah had seen that look from clients before. It was the moment they measured the difference between needing the work done and wanting the worker to know his place. Need 1. She remains in the service areas. She remains with me. Another pause. Follow me. They moved through a corridor where every object looked selected to prove it did not need to be touched. Piper walked carefully, hands tucked into her coat pockets. Jonah carried 2 cases of instruments and a canvas bag of manuals. At the end of the corridor, double doors opened into a winter garden enclosed by glass. Celeste Avery was waiting beside the elevator. The first thing Jonah noticed was not the wheelchair. It was the stillness around her. Malcolm, a housekeeper, and a young assistant stood at different distances, as if orbiting a force they had learned not to approach without instruction. Celeste wore a charcoal suit with a cream blouse, her dark hair pinned back, and no expression Jonah could read as welcoming. Her chair was narrow, custom-built, and designed for speed rather than comfort. One gloved hand rested on the control rim. The other held a brass pocket compass. It looked old enough to be valuable and worn enough to be loved. Celeste glanced at Piper. I was not told the child was coming. I told Mr. Fenn before I entered. That is not the same thing. No, it is what happened. The assistant looked down quickly. Malcolm's face became blank. Celeste turned her attention back to Jonah. Her eyes were gray, direct, and tired in a way that money had not repaired. You are the 3rd contractor this month. I read the service history. Then, the first 2 failed. I know the first replaced the door sensor, and the second blamed the motor. Neither tested the counterweight brake under load. A small silence followed. And you know this without seeing the elevator. I know the door sensor was replaced because the invoice says so. I know the motor was blamed because the report says current draw increased at the 3rd floor. The motor usually draws more current when a brake drags. Selim, Este's thumb moved once across the compass lid. How long? To diagnose it, an hour? To fix it, depends on what I find. You have until 4. That isn't how mechanical failure works. It is how my schedule works. Then your schedule may be disappointed, the assistant inhaled. Malcolm looked at Jonah as if quietly recommending survival. Celeste did not raise her voice. People usually become more agreeable after they understand who hired them. People usually become more realistic after they understand what broke. For the first time, something changed in her face. Not warmth, not yet, but attention. She rotated the chair toward the elevator. Show me. The elevator had been installed in the late 1990s, then updated twice without replacing the original shaft equipment. Jonah opened the service panel and found exactly what he expected. New wiring wrapped around old logic, labels placed over labels, modern sensors speaking through converter boards, to a controller designed before Piper's birth. He set up a folding work light. Piper sat on an overturned crate with her book. Celeste watched from a few feet away. You don't need to stay, Jonah said. It is my elevator. That doesn't make it easier to diagnose with someone asking how long every 5 minutes. I have not asked again. You're thinking it loudly. Piper lowered her book to hide a smile. Celeste noticed. Is something amusing? Piper looked at Jonah first. He gave the smallest possible shake of his head. No, ma'am. Celeste looked at the cover of her book. What are you reading? A mystery. Do you know who did it? Not yet. My dad says a good mystery tells you the truth early and makes you look somewhere else. Jonah tightened a meter lead and wished, briefly, that his daughter had chosen silence as a hobby. Celeste's gaze returned to him. Does he? He says lots of things when he's fixing stuff. Most of them are not for repeating, Jonah said. The corner of Celeste's mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was the memory of one. Jonah tested the door circuits, then the motor current, then the braking coil. The readings were inconsistent, not random interrupted. He traced the old conduit into the wall and found a junction that did not appear on the renovation drawings. There was another system connected here, he said. Malcolm answered from behind Celeste. The house has been modified many times. The circuit wasn't for the elevator. It shared emergency power with it. Can you fix the elevator or not? Celeste asked. Yes, but something on the old line is feeding noise into the controller. I need to know what used to be in the rooms above us. Her face closed so quickly, the answer arrived before her words. Storage. Jonah looked at the conduit. Not with shielded medical-grade cable. The winter garden became very quiet. Malcolm cleared his throat. The West Wing included a private therapy room many years ago. It has not been used in decades. I need access. No, Celeste said. Then I can isolate the circuit at the main panel and leave the old line dead. Will the elevator work? Probably. Probably is not sufficient. Neither is guessing what someone hid behind a wall. Her fingers tightened around the brass compass. The room remains locked. Jonah met her eyes. Then the elevator remains uncertain. For several seconds, neither moved. Piper turned a page. Finally, Celeste held out the compass toward Malcolm. The key is inside the lower compartment. Malcolm's expression flickered. He took the compass, pressed a nearly invisible catch, and opened a thin compartment beneath the face. A small brass key slid into his palm. Jonah watched Celeste watch it. The object was not decoration. It was a door she had chosen not to open. Malcolm led them upstairs by the main staircase. The route took time. Celeste used a narrow platform lift, hidden behind carved paneling, while Jonah and Piper walked beside it. At the second landing, the lift rocked once as the house power shifted. Celeste's left foot moved. It was small, barely more than a turn inside the leather shoe. Jonah might have missed it if he had been watching the lift controls. Piper did not miss it. Your shoe kicked, she said. Celeste looked down. The lift moved. No, your shoe did. Piper, Jonah said. His daughter fell silent. Celeste's face had become pale, not with fear but with anger aimed inward, as if some forbidden thought had crossed a guarded line. It was a mechanical jolt, she said. Jonah did not argue, but he had spent 8 years calibrating rehabilitation equipment before Hannah died, and he left the industry. He knew the difference between a foot carried by motion and a muscle answering it. He also knew that one movement proved almost nothing. Almost. The old therapy room occupied the southwest corner of the second floor. Dust softened the edges of everything inside it. A treatment table stood beneath a white sheet. Parallel bars ran along one wall. There were shelves of braces, cables, leather straps, and instruments that belonged to another era of medicine. A faded paper snowflake still clung to the inside of the window, its folds browned by time. Piper stepped closer to it. Someone made that. I did, Celeste said. The answer surprised everyone, including Celeste. She was still on the platform lift outside the room. Malcolm unlocked the door, but she did not cross the threshold. Jonah set down his cases and studied the wiring. The shielded line entered through the baseboard and disappeared behind an old electrical stimulation unit. Its metal housing bore a manufacturer name Jonah recognized from his first years in biomedical service. The company had closed after a merger, Its records had been absorbed, renamed, and eventually forgotten. He crouched beside the unit. This shared the elevator's emergency circuit, he said. It should have been disconnected when the room was closed. It was disconnected, Malcolm replied. Jonah touched the casing with the back of his fingers. Then why is it warm? Malcolm said nothing. Celeste's chair rolled forward 1 inch and stopped. Jonah opened the service plate. Inside, an auxiliary transformer still carried a faint current. The insulation had cracked with age, allowing a low electrical pulse to bleed into the building ground. Every time the elevator shifted to emergency balancing mode, the pulse traveled through the shared line and confused the brake controller. It was an elegant failure. Hidden, intermittent, and caused by a room everyone had decided no longer mattered. I can isolate it, Jonah said. The elevator should be stable after that. Do it, Celeste replied. He cut power at the panel, tagged the circuit, and began removing the old connection. Behind the stimulation unit, he found a metal access plate secured with 4 slotted screws. The paint across the screws was unbroken. This hasn't been opened since the room was painted, he said. It does not need to be opened now, Celeste said. The conduit runs through it. Can you complete the repair without it? Yes. Then leave it. He looked over his shoulder. You hired me to find the failure, not to stop 1 inch before the reason. I hired you to make an elevator move. It will move. The question is whether something else in this wall can fail next. That is not your concern. Jonah stood. Anything connected to my repair becomes my concern. That's the part I signed my name to. Celeste looked at him for a long time. Her gaze dropped briefly to the old equipment, the parallel bars, the paper snowflake. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled but thinner. Open it. The plate resisted. Jonah worked the screws free, catching rust flakes in his palm. Behind it was a shallow cavity containing a bundle of labeled cables and a narrow shelf. On the shelf sat 3 gray film envelopes, warped by age. Malcolm took a step forward. Those should be with the medical archive. Apparently they aren't, Jonah said. He did not touch them until Celeste entered the room. Crossing the threshold seemed to cost her more than the distance explained. Her chair moved slowly over the old floor. The tires passed 2 faint marks in the wood where a younger chair had once stopped again and again. Celeste halted beside the treatment table. Give them to me. Jonah handed her the envelopes. The first carried her name in blue type and a date from the winter after the accident. The second was marked with a hospital code and the words nerve, conduction, follow-up. The third had no name at all, only a sequence of numbers. Celeste opened the first envelope, removed a film, and held it toward the window. Dark shapes floated inside the transparent sheet, a ghost of bone and shadow. I have copies of this, she said. Jonah saw the number in the corner. May I? She hesitated, then passed it to him. He was not trained to read the anatomy. He knew enough to understand equipment, markers, exposure codes, and the administrative information burned into film. The serial line at the bottom showed which imaging unit had produced it. The report number showed which record should accompany it. He turned to Malcolm. Where are the medical binders? In the archive room. I want a report that matches this number. Celeste's eyes sharpened. Why? Because the hospital code on the envelope is from St. Aldwyn, but the machine identifier on the film belongs to Lakeshore Neurological Institute. Hospitals share imaging? They do. But not before the film exists. This envelope says the scan was taken at St. Aldwyn on January 9th. The film says it was produced at Lakeshore on January 11th. Malcolm's expression remained professional, but his hands had gone still. Celeste looked from the envelope to the film. A clerical error, she said. Maybe you say that as if you don't believe it. I say it because I don't know. You repair elevators, Mr. Reed. I used to calibrate medical equipment. That landed differently. Used to, for manufacture, imaging, electrodiagnostic, rehabilitation systems, field service and validation. It is not on your proposal. The elevator didn't need my life story. Why did you leave? Jonah looked at Piper, who had taken her book to the far side of the room. and was pretending not to listen. Later, he said, Celeste did not like being denied information. He could see that. But she also recognized when insistence would expose more than it gained. She returned the film to the envelope. Malcolm, have the archive report brought here. Ms. Avery, the physician files are confidential. They are mine. Of course. I only mean that Mr. Reed is not authorized to review them. He can review the identification data. Nothing clinical. Malcolm's gaze moved toward Jonah, and then away. I'll arrange it. He left. Jonah finished isolating the circuit, while Celeste remained in the room. She did not touch the old equipment. She did not speak. Piper eventually stood and walked to the window. Why did you leave the snowflake? She asked. Celeste glanced at it. I forgot it was there. You remembered making it. Those are not the same thing. Piper considered the answer. Maybe forgetting is when you don't remember until something asks you. Jonah kept his eyes on the wiring. Celeste looked at the child for so long that Piper began to shift her weight. Perhaps, Celeste said. The elevator worked after Jonah isolated the old therapy circuit. He tested it empty, then with calibrated weights, then with Celeste inside. The brake held at every floor. The car leveled within 3 millimeters. At 4:12, Jonah presented his report in the library. Celeste read every line. The brass compass rested beside her hand. Malcolm had not returned with the medical report. You exceeded the deadline, she said. By 12 minutes, you also found a live abandoned circuit and 3 misplaced films. Correct. The elevator is repaired. The immediate fault is repaired. The controller should be replaced within 6 months. I added temporary isolation and documented the risk. She set the report down. You are direct to the point of irritation. I've been called worse. I imagine you have. A phone rang on the desk behind her. Her assistant answered and stepped into the hall. Celeste looked toward Piper, who had fallen asleep in a leather chair, with her book open against her chest. She trusts rooms quickly, Celeste said. She trusts me to be in them. There is a difference. All the difference. Something in Celeste's face changed again. It was gone before he could name it. She opened a drawer, removed a check, and wrote an amount larger than the proposal. Jonah looked at it. This is too much. It includes the emergency call, the additional circuit work, and the inconvenience of my schedule. Your schedule was inconvenient to me. Take the check. He did, because Rent did not care about pride. Celeste closed the drawer. I need the building systems audited before Friday, not just the elevator. Every legacy circuit in the West Wing. That is at least 4 days. You have 4 days. I also have other clients. Cancel them. No. The word came out calm. She stared at him. You misunderstand leverage, Mr. Reed. You misunderstand ownership. You own this house. You don't own every hour I haven't sold yet. The winter light had faded. The windows reflected the library back at them. The portrait, the shells, the woman in the chair, the tired man in a work jacket, and a sleeping child between worlds that were not supposed to touch. Celeste reached for the compass, opened it, and watched the needle settle. Double your rate, she said. Jonah thought of the past due dental bill on his refrigerator. He thought of the transmission sound the truck made on sharp turns. He thought of Piper's school tuition for the spring program Hannah had once promised her. Triple for the rush, he said. Celeste looked up. You negotiate aggressively for a man with tape on his mirror? The mirror still works. For the first time, she smiled. It was brief and unwilling, but it was real. 8 tomorrow morning, she said. 8:30, I take Piper to school. 8:15. Done. Jonah lifted his sleeping daughter. Piper's arms circled his neck without waking. He carried her toward the door, then stopped. The report number on that film, he said. Don't let anyone substitute a summary. Ask for the original page. Celeste's smile disappeared. Why? Because summaries tell you what someone decided mattered. Originals tell you what was there. He left before she could answer. That night, long after the staff had gone quiet, Celeste returned to the therapy room alone. The elevator moved smoothly. She rolled past the treatment table and stopped at the paper snowflake. 30 years earlier, She had made 6 of them from hospital stationery while waiting for a surgeon whose name she no longer remembered. Her father had hung them in the window and told her Winter could not decide what shape she kept. 3 days later, he had signed papers that ended the proposed surgery. Or so she had been told. Celeste reached toward the film envelopes but did not open them. Instead, she looked down at her left shoe. The lift had jolted. That was all. It had to be all. 20 specialists had agreed. One movement did not outweigh 30 years. Still, she placed her palm over her thigh and closed her eyes. Nothing happened. She tried again. Not to move, only to remember what trying had once felt like. Nothing. Relief and disappointment arrived together. On the way back to the library, she found Malcolm waiting beside the elevator. "The report?" she asked. The archive manager could not locate the original. "There is a summary in the consolidated medical history." Celeste watched him. "Mr. Reed said not to accept a summary." "Mr. Reed is a contractor with an old employment histo. Rhine Medical Equipment. He is not a physician." "I am aware. There is something else." Malcolm's voice lowered. His former employer terminated him after a dispute involving patient records. There was litigation against him, against the company. His wife died during the same period. The matter was settled and sealed. Celeste looked toward the locked therapy room. "How quickly did you find that?" "I protect this house." "That was not my question." Malcolm's face remained composed. "Quickly enough." Celeste rolled past him. In the library, the compass waited beneath her father's portrait. She picked it up, opened the lid, and read the inscription she had traced with her thumb for most of her life. "True north is not the loudest voice." Her father had written that. Gideon Vale had chosen the words engraved beneath it. The distinction had never mattered before. Now it did. Jonah returned at 8:14 the next morning. Piper was at school. The truck mirror was still taped. The snow had stopped, leaving the drive bright and hard beneath a pale sky. Malcolm met him at the west entrance with a temporary identification badge and no greeting. "Ms. Avery is in a meeting. You are to begin with the electrical distribution maps. I need the original renovation drawings, not the digitized set. The digitized set is complete. Yesterday's live circuit wasn't on it. The paper archive is not available to contractors." Jonah set down his cases. "Then the audit is not available to the house?" Malcolm's expression barely changed. "You enjoy making simple tasks difficult?" "No, I dislike making difficult tasks look simple. That's how people sign reports that aren't true." The estate director's gaze hardened. Before he could answer, Celeste's voice came through the open library doors. "Give him the archive drawings." She sat at a long table, with 3 executives on a video screen. Her attention should have been on them, but she had heard every word. Malcolm turned. "Ms. Avery, those documents include private floor plans. Mr. Reed has already been in the therapy room. I doubt a pantry diagram will complete his criminal education." One of the executives on the screen stopped speaking. Celeste looked at him. "Continue, Daniel." The meeting resumed. Malcolm led Jonah to a basement archive, where paper plans lay in flat drawers under years of dust. Jonah spent the morning tracing old circuits through layers of renovation. Greystone House had grown by addition rather than design. A wall had moved here, a service stair had closed there, and each improvement had left something behind. At 11, Celeste appeared at the archive door. "You were terminated by Med Paxis Instruments," she said. Jonah did not look up from the drawing. "I resigned before they finished terminating me." "Over patient records." "Over calibration records." "Explain the difference." He set down his pencil. "A hospital was using one of our neuromuscular diagnostic systems. The unit passed its self-test, but failed under a specific load. It could produce normal-looking summaries while losing parts of the raw signal. I reported it. Management called it a rare technical anomaly and told the hospital the existing results were valid. Were they? Not all of them. And your wife? Jonah stood slowly. My wife was tested on the same model. Different hospital, different condition. The results said her symptoms were non-specific. 6 months later, they found the disease the test had helped dismiss. By then it was too late for the treatment. that might have bought her time. Celeste's face lost some of its guarded certainty. You sued? I provided records to the families who sued. MedX is settled. They never admitted the device was defective. And you left the industry. No manufacturer would hire the technician who had handed internal files to lawyers. So now you repair houses. Houses don't threaten to bury evidence under trade secrets. They just fail. She looked down the length of the archive room. And if the failure is hidden, then you trace what still carries current. The words stayed between them. Celeste turned toward the door, then stopped. The original report from the film was not in my archive. Did you ask the hospital? St. Aldwyn closed 18 years ago. Its records were transferred twice. My legal department is tracing them. Ask Lakeshore too. The film came from their machine. My consolidated history says it was taken at St. Aldwyn. Your consolidated history is the summary. She looked at him sharply. You are very certain, for someone who says he does not know? I'm certain the labels disagree. I'm not certain why. Do you think 20 specialists missed something? I think 20 specialists may have started with the same page. Her hand tightened on the chair rim. You saw one movement on a lift. I saw a possible muscle response. It could have several explanations, including wishful thinking. Mine or yours? Celeste's eyes flashed. You are not permitted to suggest things you cannot prove. Then don't ask me what I think. She rolled away. At lunch, Jonah ate a sandwich on the basement steps and studied the plans. The old therapy room had once connected to a private medical suite built for Celeste after the accident. Most of that suite had later been converted into guest rooms, but the drawings showed a small records alcove between the therapy room and a former examination room. On the current plan, the alcove did not exist. It had become wall. Jonah marked it in pencil. At 1:30, he discovered a second abandoned medical circuit, still energized behind the guest room paneling. At 2, he found an emergency call wire that ran toward the missing alcove. At 3, Malcolm ordered him not to open any walls without written approval. At 3:05, Celeste gave written approval. At 3:20, a carpenter removed a narrow strip of paneling in the former examination room. Behind it was a door, not a hidden door in the dramatic sense. It was an ordinary service door that someone had covered during renovation. Its knob had been removed. Its hinges were painted shut. Celeste arrived before the carpenter finished clearing the frame. Who ordered this wall closed? She asked. Malcolm checked the drawings. The renovation predates my employment. Who managed the house dam? Mr. Vale's office? Gideon Vale was Celeste's uncle, her father's older half-brother, and chairman of the North Star Board. He had managed the Avery estate after Thomas died. For years, he had served as Celeste's guardian, trustee, and public defender. Newspapers called him the steady hand behind her rise. Jonah had read enough corporate profiles to know what that phrase often meant. The carpenter freed the hinges. Cold, dry air breathed from the opening. Inside, narrow shelves climbed to the ceiling. Most were empty. Dust outlined the places where boxes had once stood. At the far end sat a metal cabinet with 2 drawers. Celeste crossed the threshold first. The top drawer contained receipts, equipment, manuals, and therapy schedules from the first 3 years after the accident. The bottom drawer was locked. Malcolm examined it. We can have a locksmith here tomorrow. I can open it, Jonah said. Celeste turned. You repair locks too? I repair whatever people connect to a building and then forget. The lock was simple but stiff. Jonah used a pick set from his case and opened it in 4 minutes. Inside lay a stack of folders tied with cotton tape. The first bore the name of a physical therapist. The second contained correspondence from an insurance administrator. The third was labeled Private TA. Celeste reached for it. Malcolm stepped closer. Ms. Avery, perhaps counsel should review anything marked private. It carries my father's initials. That is why I suggest caution. She looked at him. Caution protected me for 30 years. I would like to try information. She opened the faux. Elder. The first page, was a letter from Thomas Avery to a surgeon at Lakeshore Neurological Institute. The language was formal, but the handwriting beneath it was unmistakably personal. Please proceed with the full evaluation. Celeste deserves a decision based on what is possible, not what is convenient. The date was 2 days after the scan found behind the therapy unit. Celeste read the sentence twice. My father declined the evaluation, she said. No one answered. She turned the page. The next document was a scheduling confirmation for surgery consultation. The next was a preliminary nerve study summary. Several lines had been marked in red pencil. Preserved motor response below primary level of injury. Incomplete lesion cannot be excluded. Recommend repeat study and decompression review. Jonah kept his eyes on the administrative blocks. He was careful not to interpret clinical language beyond what the words said. Celeste's breathing had changed. This is not in my file, she said. Malcolm's voice became gentle. Preliminary studies are often superseded. By what? The final diagnosis. Where is it? Your physicians have the consolidated record? The summary, Jonah said. Malcolm turned on him. You have made your point. No, the paper made it. Celeste removed the next page. It was a note written by a rehabilitation specialist. The bottom half had been torn away. The visible portion described active contraction in the left hip and an inconsistent but measurable response in the left ankle. The missing portion would have contained the recommendation. Celeste stared at the torn edge. Who did this? Malcolm said nothing. Jonah examined the cabinet. The drawer was dusty, but the folder edges were cleaner than the shelf. Someone had handled them more recently than the rest of the room. This room wasn't forgotten, he said. Celeste looked at him. How do you know? The dust? The drawer was opened within the last few years, maybe more than once. Malcolm's face tightened. That is speculation. Yes, but it is testable. Celeste closed the folder and placed it on her lap. Malcolm, no one enters this room without my written permission. Have security place a camera outside the door. Of course. And find out who accessed the West Wing renovation archive in the last 10 years. The records may not go back that far. Then find out how far they do go. She rolled toward the corridor. At the threshold, the left wheel caught on a raised strip of flooring. Jonah reached instinctively for the chair, then stopped before touching it. Celeste noticed. You can move the strip, she said. I was going to ask. Most people do not. Most people should. He knelt and removed the warped piece of wood. When he looked up, she was still watching him, not as a contractor, as a man who had seen evidence that threatened the architecture of her life and had not once looked at her with pity. That evening, Jonah collected Piper from Mistress Delgado's apartment. His daughter sat at the kitchen table, cutting white paper into rough stars. You look like the job got bigger, she said. How can you tell? The money mouth. He sat across from her. What are those for? The class tree? We have to make one. That means something. What does yours mean? Piper held up a crooked star. It means scissors are hard. Jonah laughed, the first unguarded sound he had made all day. On the walk upstairs, she slipped her hand into his. Did the lady's shoe move again? I don't know. But you think maybe isn't a promise. I know. He unlocked their apartment. Hannah's framed photograph stood on the small table inside, smiling at a beach neither of them had visited since. Jonah touched the frame as he passed. It was an old habit and an apology he never explained. Piper put her paper star beside it. Maybe it can still be important, she said. Jonah looked at the photograph, then at the child, who carried both of them forward. Yes, he said, it can. Gideon. Bale arrived at Greystone House on Wednesday morning in a black sedan, followed by another carrying 2 attorneys. He was 68, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and practiced in the kind of warmth that placed one hand on your arm while the other checked whether you were useful. He found Celeste in the library with the private folder, open on the table, and Jonah standing beside a wiring diagram. There she is, Gideon said, as if entering a family breakfast instead of an investigation. I came the moment Malcolm called. Celeste's eyes moved to the estate director. Malcolm stood near the door. The discovery concerned family records. I believe Mr. Vale should know. You believed wrong, Celeste said. Gideon gave Malcolm a forgiving look. He was protecting you. That phrase is becoming expensive. Gideon removed his coat and laid it over a chair. His attention settled on Jonah. And this is the repairman. Jonah Reed, Jonah said. Yes, I read the report Malcolm prepared. Former MedAxis employee, whistleblower, widower. A talent for finding conspiracies near expensive machinery. Jonah held his gaze. A talent for reading serial numbers. Serial numbers are not medicine. Neither is hiding records behind a wall. One of the attorneys shifted. Gideon's smile remained. Celeste, may we speak privately? No. This man has accessed confidential medical material. At my direction, you gave that direction before knowing his history. His history includes being right about falsified calibration records. His history includes obsession after grief. Those are not the same thing. The words were aimed at Jonah, but meant for Celeste. She recognized the tactic. Gideon had used versions of it for years, a soft warning that doubt itself was a symptom. That resistance came from pain rather than judgment. Tell me why my father's letter says he approved the Lakeshore evaluation, she said. Gideon looked at the open folder and let sadness enter his face. Because your father was desperate? You told me he refused it. He did, after the final consultation. Where is that consultation report? Lost, perhaps. It was 30 years ago. The preliminary report was also lost. In a locked drawer inside a room your office had sealed. I managed hundreds of decisions after Thomas died. The renovation was not about one folder. Who tore the bottom from the rehabilitation note? Gideon's expression hardened by a degree. You are asking questions as if the answers can change your condition. The room went still. Jonah saw the impact in Celeste's shoulders. Not collapse. Compression. Gideon continued in a softer voice. I am trying to protect you from another round of false hope. You were 14. You may not remember the specialist, the procedures, the nights you could not sleep because someone had promised the next test would be different. I remember. I was there. My father was there, until he wasn't. And after he died, I stayed. That was the oldest debt between them. Gideon never named it directly. He did not need to. Celeste closed the folder. Then help me locate the originals. I will have counsel make reasonable inquiries. No. I want an independent forensic review of every medical record, every transfer log, every trust communication, and every payment connected to my care in the first 5 years after the accident. The warmth left his face. That would expose private family matters during a critical board week. The board is not my family. The board will decide on Friday whether to approve the Kestrel merger. We cannot destabilize confidence now. Northstar's proposed merger with Kestrel Automation was worth $4 billion. Gideon supported it. Celeste had delayed the vote twice, arguing that Kestrel's liabilities were hidden inside complex subsidiaries. The board delegation was coming to Greystone House because Gideon believed the privacy of a family estate would help him secure her final approval. Now a replay, another hidden liability had surfaced. The vote proceeds, Celeste said. The review also proceeds. Gideon turned to Jonah. Your contract is terminated. You do not employ him, Celeste said. The estate trust owns this property. I chair the trust. Celeste opened the brass compass and removed the small key from its lower compartment. She placed it on the table. My father transferred Greystone House to me on my 25th birthday. You administer maintenance funds. You do not own the stone, the elevators, or the doors. Gideon's voice became quiet. You are making decisions under emotional strain, and you are confusing my restraint with dependence. For the first time, Jonah saw Gideon lose control of his face. It lasted less than a second. Then the smile returned. Very well. Keep your contractor. But understand what happens if this becomes public. Every journalist who has ever called you cold will suddenly call you delusional. Every investor will ask whether the CEO of Northstar is chasing a childhood cure during a merge vote. Celeste's hand rested on the closed compass. Then we will not chase a cure, she said. We will chase a document. Gideon left with his attorneys. Malcolm followed. When the library doors closed, Celeste remained motionless. Jonah began rolling the wiring diagram because it gave her time, without announcing that he was giving it. You don't have to stay, she said. You hired me for 4 days. He will investigate you more deeply now. He won't find anything I haven't already paid for. Everyone has something. Jonah looked at her. Do you want me to leave? The question was simple. It did not ask whether leaving was wise or whether staying was dangerous. It asked what she wanted. Celeste looked toward the portrait of her father. No, she said. Then I stay. He returned to work. By noon, he had documented 11 abandoned circuits, 3 unsafe junctions, and a pattern. Every line associated with the old medical suite had been decommissioned on paper 2 years after Thomas Avery's death. In reality, several remained active. Someone had wanted the rooms closed but not fully disconnected. At 1, Celeste's legal department reported that the St. Aldwyn records had been transferred to a county archive, then to a private storage company that dissolved. Lakeshore Neurological Institute had no patient file under Celeste's current name. Current name, Jonah asked. Celeste frowned. It has always been my name. Was the accident file opened under Avery? Of course. He looked at the film envelope again. The patient code began CM14. What was your mother's surname? Morrow. Why? The code may not be random. They asked Lakeshore to search for Celeste Morrow. The archivist found a dormant index entry within 20 minutes. The physical file had been withdrawn 30 years earlier by an authorized family representative. The representative's name was Gideon Vale. Celeste read the message on the library screen. Her face did not change. Only her voice did. Get the withdrawal form. The archivist explained that old authorization images were stored off-site and could take 2 business days. The board vote was in 48 hours. Jonah saw the calculation happen behind Celeste's eyes. Time, risk, evidence, response. She managed emotion the way she managed a company. Privately, and after everyone else had gone, there may be another route, he said, which is the equipment manufacturer, the film serial, can identify the exact unit. Service companies kept test exposures and validation logs. If Lakeshore sent raw studies to a specialist, the transmission may be in the vendor archive. The manufacturer still exists, not under the same name. It was acquired by Norvale Medical, then split. The diagnostic division became Helix Clinical Systems. Do you have contacts there? 1, if he still answers my calls. Jonah phoned a former colleague named Owen Park, who now managed legacy compliance for Helix. Owen listened without interrupting, then said, old validation data was stored on microfilm in a warehouse outside Rockford. How old? Jonah asked. Old enough that no one knows why we're paying rent for it. Can you search the machine's serial? Not remotely. The index is on paper. Can I come? You can't access patient data. I only need to identify whether the unit produced a validation exception on a specific date. Celeste Avery can sign authorization. Owen went silent. Jonah, your name still causes meetings around here. Then don't do it for me. Do it because a record may have been altered. Another silence. Tomorrow morning, Owen said. 9. Bring the authorization and counsel. Celeste ended the call after providing her legal team with instructions. I will go, she said. Jonah looked out at the snow gathering again. The warehouse is not accessible. Then it will become accessible in 12 hours. You repaired an elevator in 1 day. That elevator wanted to be repaired. So do I. The words came out before she could stop them. Jonah did not look away. Celeste turned toward the window. I mean, the record. I know what you mean. Neither of them believed him entirely. That afternoon, Piper's school closed early because another storm band was moving through. Jonah went to collect her. He expected Celeste to dismiss him for the day. Instead, she told him to bring Piper back and finish the West Wing audit. You don't permit children during business hours, he reminded her. I have revised the policy. For how long? Until 5. Piper returned, carrying a paper star with uneven points. She found Celeste in the library, reviewing 30 years of physician summaries arranged in neat stacks. That's a lot of homework, Piper said. It is. Did you get in trouble? Possibly. Piper walked around the table. Each binder carried a specialist's name and a year, 20 in all. Some were thick, some thin. Every final page repeated a version of the same diagnosis. Did all those people write about you? Yes. Did they all meet you? Most did. Piper pointed to the oldest binder. Did they read this first? Celeste looked at her. Probably. And then the next person read that one. Yes. Piper studied the line of binders. Then maybe it wasn't 20 answers, she said. Maybe it was one answer 20 people kept copying. Jonah had entered without either of them noticing. Celeste looked at him across the table. The child had said, in one sentence, what the adults had been circling for 2 days. Piper held out the paper star. This is for your tree. Dad says houses this big are supposed to have trees. There's one in the East Hall. I haven't seen it. Neither have I. Piper frowned. But it's your house. Celeste accepted the star. It was badly cut and covered with blue marker. In the center, Piper had written maybe matters. Celeste read the words twice. Your father told you that? No, I told him. Jonah lowered his head, smiling. Celeste placed the star beside the brass compass. For the rest of the afternoon, it remained there, crooked and bright against the dark wood. The road to Rockford was nearly empty the next morning. Jonah drove his truck because Celeste's sedan could not cross the unplowed access road to the warehouse. A portable ramp rested in the bed beside his tools. Celeste sat in the passenger seat after refusing 3 different offers of assistance and accepting the 4th only because Jonah presented it as a problem of geometry rather than weakness. The seat is too high, she said. The ramp angle is within range. For the chair, perhaps. For you too, I measured. You measured my transfer. I measured the truck. You are the part of the equation that can speak. She gave him a long look, then completed the transfer using the grab bar he had installed the night before. It took effort. He did not reach for her. He stood close enough to help if asked and far enough to let the move and belonged to her. When she settled into the seat, she was breathing harder. Do not congratulate me, she said. I was going to complain about snow on the floor mat. Good, that. Piper rode behind them because school remained closed. Celeste's general counsel, Irene Shaw, followed in another vehicle with Owen Park. Malcolm had asked to join and had been refused. The warehouse stood behind a chain-link fence among low industrial buildings. Its office entrance had 3 concrete steps and no ramp. Jonah unfolded the portable aluminum rails. Celeste studied them. You carry these for equipment, not people. Today, they're for both. Inside, the air smelled of paper, cold metal, and dust. Rows of storage cabinets extended beneath fluorescent lights. Owen Park was a thin man in his 50s with careful speech and the posture of someone who had spent a career explaining risks to executives who disliked them. He shook Celeste's hand and nodded to Jonah. For the record, Owen said, we are reviewing equipment validation and transmission logs only. Any patient information discovered will be handled by Ms. Shaw. Understood, Jonah replied. And for the other record, I still think this is a terrible idea. You always did. You were usually right. That was the inconvenient part. The index occupied 4 binders and had been typed by year, facility, and machine serial. They found the Lakeshore unit after 30 minutes. The machine had undergone an emergency calibration on January 12th, 30 years earlier, one day after the film in Celeste's envelope had been produced. The notation read, signal attenuation, under lower limb motor protocol, manual recalculation required, for studies 108 through 1 to 11th. Owen removed his glasses. That is not normal. Celeste sat very still. What does it mean? It means the unit under-recorded certain signals for 4 days. The results were supposed to be manually recalculated and amended. Were they? There should be a correction batch. They searched the next cabinet. The correction batch was missing. In its place sat a withdrawal slip signed by a Helix predecessor company employee. The recipient was listed as G. Vale, family representative, with a law firm address. Irene photographed the slip. "This proves he collected a correction packet," she said. "It does not prove what it contained." Jonah studied the cabinet sequence. The batch numbers jumped from 87 to 91. 3 packets are gone. Owen checked the log. All 3 involved studies requested by Lakeshore. "Can we identify the patients?" Celeste asked. "Not without a lawful record request." Irene was already typing. "I can have one filed today." Piper sat at a folding table drawing on scrap paper. She had been quiet for almost an hour, which Jonah knew meant she was listening carefully. "What happens if the packet says they were wrong?" she asked. Owen looked at Celeste, then Jonah. Jonah answered, "Then doctors look again with better information. And she walks? No one knows that." Piper frowned. "But maybe." Celeste looked at the blue paper star taped to the inside of her folio. She had brought it without explanation. "Maybe," she said. They spent the next 3 hours reconstructing the record chain. One vendor log led to a shipping manifest. The manifest led to a law firm receipt. The receipt showed Gideon Vale had collected 3 corrected studies on the same afternoon. One belonged to Celeste Morrow. The other 2 names were redacted, pending legal authorization. At 2:15, Irene received a response from Lakeshore's successor organization. A retired neurologist had donated his private teaching files to a university archive. The index included a case matching Celeste's age, date, and injury. The archive was 90 minutes away. It closed at 4. Jonah looked at the weather. Snow had begun to move sideways across the warehouse windows. "We won't make it safely," he said. Celeste closed her folio. "We will make it's not in this truck." Then used a sedan. "The interstate is icing. The board meets tomorrow." "The board can wait. The road won't care." "You do not decide my risk?" "No. I decide mine and Piper's." Celeste's face hardened. "Then remain here. Irene will take me." Irene looked toward the window. "My car is not equipped for that road either. Call a driver. There are travel advisories." Celeste turned her chair sharply, anger flashing through her control. "For 30 years, every decision about my body has been made by someone explaining danger. Every door closed with a reasonable voice, every possibility delayed until it disappeared. I am not waiting another day because snow makes everyone cautious." Jonah heard the 14-year-old beneath the executive. Not childish, trapped at the point where adults had converted fear into certainty. He knelt so they were eye to eye. "I'm not asking you to wait because I think you can't handle the truth," he said. "I'm asking because a truck in a ditch will not get you a document." "Give me 20 minutes." "For what?" "And better route." He called a freight dispatcher he knew from restoration work. A salt truck was leaving Rockford toward the university town in half an hour. The driver agreed to let Jonah's truck follow at a safe distance if they met at the North Depot. They arrived at the university archive at 3:53. The archivist, Dr. Lila Chen, stayed late after reading Irene's authorization. She led them into a climate-controlled room where old teaching files had been digitized but not fully cataloged. The neurologist's case notes appeared on a screen. Patient, CM, 14-year-old female. Severe thoracolumbar trauma. Initial study limited by equipment error. Corrected data demonstrates preserved conduction. Inconsistent with complete transection. Recommend decompression consultation. Repeat motor assessment and sustained rehabilitation. Prognosis guarded, but not absent. Celeste read the last 5 words. Not absent. For 30 years, she had been told there had been nothing to pursue. Not a low chance. Not a dangerous chance. Nothing. The next page contained a handwritten note. Family representative has requested cessation of further testing and transfer to private care. Father reportedly opposed. Representative states legal guardianship authority is in process due to father's instability. Following accident. Celeste's voice was almost soundless. My father was not unstable. Irene scrolled. Attached was a letter from Thomas Avery dated the following morning. I did not authorize cessation. I request immediate reinstatement of evaluation. My brother has no authority to act for Celeste. The letter had been stamped, received. 2 days later, Thomas Avery died in a single-car collision on a dry road. Celeste looked at the date. Gideon told me my father changed his mind the night before he died. No one spoke. The final note was added by the neurologist after Thomas's death. Patient removed from program by guardian. Corrected study and recommendation provided to guardian's counsel. No further contact permitted. Jonah felt Piper's hand close around 2 of his fingers. Celeste did not cry. Her grief had been compressed for too long to emerge as tears. It appeared instead as perfect stillness. 20 specialists, she said. Everyone asked for my prior diagnosis. Everyone received the same consolidated history. Complete injury? No preserved function. Rehabilitation exhausted. Dr. Chen nodded carefully. Later physicians may have examined you honestly based on the information available. This file does not establish what is possible now. It establishes that the original record was materially different. They were reading the wrong first page, Piper said. Celeste closed her eyes. When she opened them, the CEO had returned. But not the same one. Irene. Preserve copies under seal. Send them to 3 independent medical centers. No one connected to North Star. The Trust O.R. Gideon's firms. I'll begin now. Also send the withdrawal logs and payment records to outside counsel. Yes. Jonah, how long have we been here? He checked the time. 4 hours and 16 minutes since we entered the warehouse. No, since you noticed the film number on Monday, 2 days. And since we began the full record search this morning, 7 hours. Celeste looked at the screen, carrying the truth that had been absent from her life for 30 years. 1 day, she said. It took 1 day to expose what 20 specialists never saw. Jonah shook his head. It took 1 day because they all received the same lie. Don't turn this into a story about 1 clever man and 20 foolish doctors. Turn it into a story about what happens when the original record belongs to the person whose life it describes. Dr. Chen looked at him with quiet approval. Celeste studied his face. You could let me believe you rescued me, she said. That would be another lie. The answer reached her somewhere no diagnosis had. They returned to Greystone House after dark, behind the salt truck. Piper slept in the back seat. Celeste held the brass compass in both hands, the lid open, the needle trembling with every turn. At the gate, security lights flashed red and blue. 2 police vehicles waited near the west entrance. Malcolm stood beside Gideon Vale. Gideon held a folder. The moment Jonah stepped from the truck, an officer approached. Jonah Reed. Yes. We need to speak with you regarding the removal of confidential records and unauthorized access to protected systems. Celeste opened the passenger door. He acted under my authorization. Gideon came forward. Your authorization does not extend to stolen corporate data. Mr. Reed used North Star credentials to access a restricted vendor archive. Our security system recorded the login. Jonah looked at Irene. Her face had gone pale. We used the authorization link sent by the legal department. Gideon opened the folder. The link was generated from Celeste's executive account after unusual access from Mr. Reed's device. North Star Security has classified it as compromised. That is false, Celeste said. Perhaps, but the merger committee has called an emergency session. They are also reviewing whether you are medically and emotionally fit to direct the company during an active breach. There it was. Not only a defense, a move. Gideon had turned the truth into evidence against her. The officer asked Jonah to surrender his laptop and phone for examination. Irene advised cooperation. Piper woke as another officer placed Jonah's tool cases in an evidence vehicle. Dad, he went to her before anyone could stop him. It's okay. She looked at the police lights. That's the lying mouth. He almost broke then, not because he feared arrest, because his daughter knew the shape of his protection too well. I'm going to answer questions, he said. Mistress Shaw will stay with you. Piper clung to his jacket. You didn't take anything? I know. Celeste rolled closer. Piper, you can stay here tonight. I will not let anyone separate you from your father longer than necessary. Piper looked at her through tears. Can you promise? Celeste glanced at Gideon. The officers, the house that had hidden a room in the company, now trying to call her unstable. I can promise I will not stop, she said. Jonah was taken to the station for questioning. By midnight, the news had leaked. Northstar CEO's private medical obsession triggers data breach. The article named Jonah as a disgraced former medical technician. It described Celeste as vulnerable, isolated, and influenced by a contractor with a history of litigation. At 12:23, Northstar directors requested an emergency vote to suspend her authority. At 12:40, Malcolm informed Celeste that Gideon had invoked a trust provision to freeze estate legal funds pending a capacity review. At 1:10, the external medical centers canceled their expedient TED evaluations after receiving legal threats concerning stolen records. The truth had surfaced, and in less than 6 hours, Gideon had buried it beneath a larger story. At 2 in the morning, Greystone House was quieter than any place containing that much fear had a right to be. Piper sat on the library sofa wrapped in a wool blanket. Irene worked at the long table with 2 independent attorneys on speakerphone. Celeste remained beneath her father's portrait, the blue paper star and brass compass before her. Malcolm stood near the doors. Mr. Vale recommends that you make no public statement, he said. He believes the board may avoid suspension if you agree to a temporary medical leave. Celeste looked at him. How long have you reported to Gideon? Malcolm did not answer immediately. I report to the estate trust. That was not my question. His eyes flowed. Since before I came here, he placed you in my house. He asked me to ensure you were protected. From what? From people who might exploit you. Celeste almost smiled. And when none appeared, he found one. Mr. Reed accessed private systems. Mr. Reed found a document your employer spent 30 years hiding. Malcolm's face tightened. You do not know what Mr. Vale hid. You know only that he managed to frighten family after a terrible accident. My father objected in writing. Your father was reckless. He blamed himself. He wanted another procedure when every physician warned that it could worsen your condition. Mr. Vale believed stability was kinder. Kinder to whom? Malcolm had no answer. Celeste opened the compass. Did you search the therapy room after Jonah found the films? His silence answered. What did you remove? Nothing. You touched the folder. I confirmed what it contained. For Gideon. For the trust. Celeste closed the lid. Leave the house. Ms. Avery. Now, security will escort you. Security reports to the trust. Irene looked up. Not the private team I hired 40 minutes ago. 2 guards appeared in the corridor. Malcolm stared at Celeste. There was regret in his expression, but not enough courage to make it useful. He did care for you, he said. Possession often imitates care from a distance. He left. Piper watched from the sofa. After the doors closed, she asked, Is my dad going to jail? Celeste rolled toward her. No charges have been filed. The police are checking what happened. That's not what I asked. Celeste stopped. Children were exhausting because they treated careful language as a locked door and simply walked around it. I do not know, she said. Piper pulled the blanket tighter. He tells me when he doesn't know. Then he has raced too well. He thinks he hasn't. Celeste looked at the child. Why? Because mom died and sometimes he forgets things. Like permission slips. And he thinks being tired means he's doing it wrong. The room softened around the words. Your mother was ill? Celeste asked. Piper nodded. The machine said she wasn't. Then later she was. Dad got mad at the machine company. He told me. He doesn't tell people much. Neither do I. Piper looked at her legs, not with pity, with the direct curiosity of a child assembling a map. Did you stop trying because they said no? Celeste felt the question strike the place she kept most protected. I tried for years. How many? 9. Then what? Celeste could have ended the conversation. Instead, perhaps because the house had already surrendered its secrets, she spoke. Then the exercises became smaller. The appointments became farther apart. Every new specialist read the same history and explained the same limit. Some were kind, some were impatient. One told me continuing therapy was an emotional refusal to accept reality. Gideon repeated that sentence for years. Eventually, I built a life no one could call unfinished. I went to school. I took control of the company. I learned to enter a room before anyone could decide what I lacked. Piper listened. But you still kept the room. Celeste looked toward the west wing. Yes. Why? The answer came flat, almost without feeling, which was the only way Celeste could say it. Because when she was 14, her father had promised they would return to the parallel bars after Christmas. He had said progress did not need to be large to be real. The morning after he died, Gideon had ordered the therapy schedule canceled. Celeste had screamed until her throat bled. 2 nurses held her shoulders, while a doctor explained grief could cause irrational fixation. The equipment was moved into storage. The paper snowflakes stayed in the window. Years later, when Greystone House was renovated, Celeste told Gideon to destroy the room. He closed it instead. She had hated him for preserving it. Now she understood he had preserved the records he needed to control. Piper climbed down from the sofa and walked to the table. She picked up the blue star. My mom kept a box under the bed, she said. Dad didn't open it for 2 years. Then I needed glitter and found it. It had letters for us. Maybe grown-ups hide things because they think not looking is the same as not hurting. Celeste looked at the crooked star in Piper's hand. Your father opened the box. After I did. Was he angry? He cried in the bathroom because he thinks doors make crying private. Irene turned away from the table, giving Jonah's dignity the shelter it had not received from his daughter. Piper placed the star on Celeste's lap. You should put this in the old room. It needs a new one. At 3:15, Irene received confirmation that Jonah would be released without charge. The authorization link had originated from Celeste's account through a device managed by North Star Security. The alleged breach could not be attributed to him. His laptop would be returned after imaging. At 4, he came through the library doors. Piper ran into him so hard, he took 1 step backward. He lifted her and held on. Celeste watched his face over the child's shoulder. Exhaustion, anger, relief, no accusation. I'm sorry, she said. Jonah set Piper down. For which part? Your name is in the news because of me. Your daughter spent the night frightened in a stranger's house. Your equipment was seized. Gideon did that. He did it through my company and my home. That doesn't make it yours. Responsibility is not limited to intent. Jonah looked at her for a long moment. No, it isn't. The answer could have been condemnation. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat. What do we have? Irene briefed him. The server log showed Celeste's account had been used to generate the archive authorization, but the access path had passed through a security proxy controlled by Gideon's committee. That made the breach allegation weaker. Yet the board still planned to vote at 9 that morning on Celeste's temporary suspension. The medical evidence remained sealed. Publicly releasing it could violate privacy law and allow Gideon to claim emotional instability. Privately presenting it to the board might not be enough because he controlled 6 of 11 directors. What about the merger? Jonah asked. Celeste's eyes sharpened. What about it? Gideon moved against you the night before the vote. Maybe the medical lie isn't only about control of your trust. Maybe it's connected to why he needs the merger. Irene opened the Kestrel files. Celeste had delayed approval because of hidden liabilities. Jonah asked to see the vendor lists, not the financial summaries. He found Helix Clinical Systems on a Kestrel subsidiary schedule. Kestrel owns part of the company that inherited the old medical records, he said. Irene leaned closer. Through 2 holding companies, Celeste saw the line at once. If North Star acquires Kestrel, Gideon gains influence over the archive custodian. And the correction logs, Jonah said. They trace payments from the Avery Trust to Gideon's former law firm, then from T. Hat firm to a consulting company that had participated in the Kestrel merger. The amounts repeated every year under medical confidentiality services. He has been paying to monitor the record chain, Irene said. For 30 years? Piper asked. Not constantly, Jonah said, but enough to know where the originals went. Celeste looked at the clock. 5:20, 3 hours and 40 minutes before the board vote. We need testimony from someone inside the old chain, she said. Owen Park answered on the second ring. He had spent the night reviewing the warehouse index. One of the 3 missing correction packets involved a patient named Evelyn Cross. The third involved a boy named Samuel Ortiz. Both had later sued over misdiagnosis, but their cases had been settled under seal. Irene began locating counsel for the families. At 6:10, she reached Evelyn Cross herself, now 63 and living in Michigan. Evelyn had spent 12 years being treated for complete nerve loss before a new test found preserved function. She never walked without assistance, but after surgery and rehabilitation, she regained enough control to stand, transfer independently, and live without full-time care. Her family had sued the original hospital. Gideon's law firm had represented the equipment company in the settlement. Will she speak? Celeste asked. Irene covered the phone. She says she has waited 30 years for someone to ask the right question. At 6:40, Samuel Ortiz's older sister agreed to provide records. Samuel had died years earlier, but his corrected study also showed the machine error. His family had been paid to remain silent. The pattern was no longer private. Gideon had not hidden one uncertain report to protect a frightened child. He had participated in suppressing a known equipment failure affecting multiple patients, then used the falsified diagnosis to maintain authority over Celeste's trust and company shares. At 7, Celeste contacted the 3 independent medical centers again. This time she did not ask for expedited treatment. She asked only for an evidence preservation consultation and a new evaluation based on original data. One center agreed. At 7:20, Jonah went to the old therapy room. Celeste followed. He was standing beside the parallel bars when she entered. The paper snowflake still hung in the window. Piper's blue star rested on the treatment table. The board packet is ready, Celeste said. Good. You should take Piper home. Do you want me at the meeting? You are not an executive, a lawyer, or a physician. That wasn't my question. She looked at the bars. Yes, she said, I want you there. Jonah nodded. Celeste touched the brass compass. I spent my entire life becoming impossible to dismiss. One false story, and by midnight they were discussing my capacity as if I were 14 again. Then don't prove you're strong. Make them prove their story is true. You make it sound simple. No, I make it sound like work. She looked at him, and something in her expression gave way. Not dramatically. The armor did not fall. It opened at one seam. I was afraid to look at the records, she said. Not because I thought they would confirm the diagnosis, because I thought they would not. Jonah understood. A lie could steal 30 years. The truth could make a person feel those years all at once. You survived the life you were given, he said. That doesn't become worthless because another life was possible. Celeste's eyes shone, but the tears did not fall. And if nothing changes physically, then the truth still belongs to you. She reached for his hand. The gesture was small and deliberate. Jonah held her fingers without turning it into comfort she had not requested. For a few seconds, they stood and sat beside the old parallel bars, while snow brightened the window. Piper appeared in the doorway, wearing Jonah's oversized work gloves. Mr. Shaw says the meeting starts soon. Also, I found tape. She crossed the room and carefully fixed her blue star beside the old paper snowflake. One made by a frightened girl, 30 years ago. One made by a child who believed maybe mattered. Celeste looked at both. Let's go, she said. The North Star board assembled in Greystone House at 9 sharp. 11 directors sat around the long dining table. Gideon occupied the chair at the far end, flanked by counsel and the head of corporate security. 2 screens displayed remote advisors. The snow had turned the windows white, sealing the room from the outside world. Celeste entered first. Jonah followed with Piper, who sat quietly near the wall beside Irene. He wore the only suit he owned, dark gray and slightly tight across the shoulders. Celeste wore black. The brass compass rested on the table in front of her. Gideon opened the meeting with regret. He spoke of duty, stability, and the painful necessity of acting when a leader's private vulnerability threatened a public institution. He described the archive search as unauthorized, the medical claims as unverified, and Jonah as a man whose personal tragedy had led him to see fraud where professionals had found none. "This is not a judgment of Celeste's achievements," Gideon said. "It is an effort to preserve them. I move that the board appoint an interim executive committee until a medical capacity review is complete." A director named Ruth Calder seconded the motion. Celeste waited until Gideon asked whether she wished to respond. "Yes," she said, "but not to your motion. First, I want the board to understand why the Kestrel merger is being rushed." Gideon's counsel objected. "The capacity motion must be resolved before unrelated business." "It is not unrelated," Irene said. "The evidence packet has been distributed under privilege." Folders appeared before each director. Gideon did not touch his. Celeste continued. 30 years ago, a diagnostic equipment failure affected at least 3 patients at Lakeshore Neurological Institute. Corrected studies were generated. Gideon Vale collected those corrections through counsel. One study concerned me. The other 2 concerned Evelyn Cross and Samuel Ortiz. All 3 families received incomplete or altered records. 2 later entered confidential settlements handled by Gideon's firm. Ruth Calder opened her packet. Gideon leaned back. "This is a grotesque distortion. The settlements involved the hospital and equipment vendor. I acted as counsel, not conspirator." "Then explain why the Avery Trust paid annual confidentiality consulting fees to your former firm after the settlements ended." "Ongoing legal protection." "Protection of what?" "Private medical information. Mine, among other matters." Celeste nodded to Irene. A payment chart appeared on the screen. "Those fees passed through a consulting company that now advises the Kestrel merger. Kestrel controls the corporate successor, holding the original validation archive. If North Star acquires Kestrel, the archive custodian becomes dependent on a company chaired by you." The director near the middle of the table removed his glasses. "Gideon, were you aware of that ownership chain? The merger includes hundreds of subsidiaries." "That is not an answer." Gideon's voice sharpened. "I will not allow a repairman and a frightened child to turn corporate governance into theater." Piper looked at Jonah. Jonah did not move. Celeste opened the compass. "Neither will I. That is why the packet includes sworn testimony, original vendor logs, chain of custody receipts, and a letter from my father, explicitly denying Gideon authority to stop my evaluation." She slid a copy across the table. Gideon finally looked down. The room changed, not because every director believed Celeste immediately, because evidence had replaced concern. Gideon's language of protection could not carry the same weight against dates, signatures, and money transfers. Irene called Evelyn Cross by video. Evelyn appeared on the screen. Roma Mata's living room. Her silver hair was cut short. A walking frame stood beside her chair. She described the original diagnosis, the years of limited treatment, and the later discovery that preserved nerve function had been omitted from her records. She did not dramatize. She did not accuse Celeste. She simply told the board what happened when one altered first page followed a patient for years. "The second doctor trusted the first," Evelyn said. "The third trusted both. After a while, the history became heavier than my body." Piper looked at Celeste. Celeste kept her eyes on the screen. Next came Owen Park's affidavit confirming the equipment failure and missing correction batch. Then the university archive custodian verified the teaching file. Then an outside forensic accountant explained the payments, linking Gideon's firm to the Kestrel consultants. Gideon listened with his hands folded. When the last presentation ended, he turned to Celeste. "Even if every document is genuine, none proves I acted against you. Thomas was reckless after the accident. He wanted surgery with unacceptable risk. I made the decision he was too broken to make." Celeste's voice stayed level. "You were not my guardian when you made it. I became your guardian 3 days later, after my father died. Yes. And you used a decision you had no authority to make as evidence that the decision had already been made. Gideon leaned forward. I gave you stability. I built the conditions that allowed you to lead this company. Without me, North Star would have been sold before you finished school. You taught me how to read a balance sheet. You also taught me that dependence can be manufactured and called gratitude. Both are true. He looked at her with something that may once have been love and had long ago hardened into entitlement. You think this man changed your life in one day? Celeste glanced at Jonah. No, she said. He noticed a number. Then he refused to let powerful people decide that noticing was dangerous. The truth changed my life. He simply did not look away. The directors began asking questions. Gideon's answers grew shorter. Corporate security admitted the authorization link had been routed through a committee proxy. The head of security could not explain why the breach alert had been leaked to the FRO press before Jonah's device was examined. Ruth Calder disclosed that Gideon had called her before midnight and told her Celeste was experiencing a psychological crisis. Did you speak with her first? Another director asked. Ruth looked down. No. At 11:12, the capacity motion was withdrawn. At 11:17, the merger vote was postponed indefinitely. At 11:23, the board formed a special committee to investigate Gideon's conflicts and removed him as chair, pending review. There was no shouting. No one applauded. Gideon gathered his papers, placed them in a leather case, and stood. At the door, he looked back at Celeste. You will discover that truth is not the same as recovery. Celeste touched the brass compass. I know, she said. You're the one who confused control with care. He left. The room stayed quiet for several seconds after the doors closed. Then business resumed. That mattered to Celeste more than triumph would have. No one lowered their voice. No one asked whether she needed to rest. The directors reviewed the Kestrel exposure, authorized independent counsel, and confirmed her authority as chief executive. She had not been restored to dignity. She had never lost it. At 1:30, the meeting ended. Piper ran to the table. Did you win? Celeste looked around at the folders. Empty water glasses and snow beyond the windows. We found the next question. Piper frowned. That sounds like an adult way of saying yes. Jonah laughed. Celeste did too. It was the first time the sound had filled the library. 3 days later, an independent medical team evaluated Celeste at a university hospital. Jonah did not attend the examinations. He repaired the remaining circuits at Greystone House, replaced unsafe panels, and finished the audit he had been hired to perform. Celeste called him that evening. They found voluntary motor signals, she said. Jonah sat at his kitchen table while Piper slept on the sofa beneath a blanket. How much? Small. Inconsistent. More on the left. The imaging shows the original injury was incomplete, but there is extensive scarring and 30 years of secondary change. He waited. They do not know what function can return, she continued. There may be surgery. There will be months of testing. First, rehabilitation. Regardless, they were careful not to promise. Good. Good. Promises would be suspicious. A plan is better. Silence traveled through the phone. I am afraid, she said. It was the first time she had said the words without converting them into strategy. I know. If I try and nothing changes, everyone will watch me fail. Then don't do it for everyone. For whom? Jonah looked at Hannah's photograph. The 14-year-old who was never given the choice. Celeste breathed in slowly. Will you come tomorrow? To the hospital? No, to Greystone. The therapy room needs work. He smiled. What kind? The kind houses need when people stop pretending a room is dead. The next morning, Jonah brought tools. Piper brought paper. They opened the therapy room windows, cleaned the old shelves, and removed equipment that no longer met safety standards. Celeste directed every change. The parallel bars remained. So did the treatment table after restoration. The old paper snowflake stayed in the window beside Piper's blue star. Jonah found a small screw hole beneath the window frame and repaired it. Behind a loose trim was a narrow envelope It had been hidden so flat that the renovation crew had paneled over it. Celeste recognized her father's handwriting before Jonah handed it to her. For Celeste, when she is ready. Inside was a single page and a photograph. The photograph showed 14-year-old Celeste between the parallel bars, her father's hands hovering near her elbows but not touching. Her face was tense with concentration. Her left knee was bent slightly forward. The letter was brief. My dearest girl, everyone around us is speaking in final words, because final words make frightened people feel safe. I do not know what your body will do. Neither does anyone else. I know only that the corrected tests gave us reason to keep asking, and I will not let my fear become your limit. If I fail you, find the true record. If the voices become loud, use the compass. True north is not the loudest voice. Your father. Celeste read it once. Then again. The tears came without permission. Jonah moved toward the door. Stay, she said. He stayed. Piper stood beside the window, suddenly quiet. Celeste held the letter against her chest and cried for the father she had blamed, the girl she had silenced, and the 30 years no court could return. Jonah did not tell her the grief was healing. He did not tell her the truth had arrived in time. Some losses do not become smaller because they are understood. They simply become honest. When Celeste could speak, she looked at the photograph. He was going to come back. Yes. I spent 30 years believing he chose caution over me. He chose you. Someone changed the record. Piper touched the edge of the parallel bar. Can we hang the picture? Celeste wiped her face. Not yet. Why? Because I want to look at it first without anyone else deciding what it means. Piper nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Celeste folded the letter along its original crease and placed it inside the brass compass compartment where the key had been. The key now opened a room she no longer needed, locked. The letter would guide what came next. The investigation widened after Christmas. Gideon resigned from the North Star board before the special committee completed its first report. He called the decision an effort to spare the company further distraction. Outside counsel called it something else. The vendor logs, settlement payments, and trust records showed a pattern of concealed conflict stretching across 3 decades. Prosecutors began asking questions. Civil claims followed. The language remained careful because the law moved more slowly than outrage, but the essential fact no longer depended on anyone's opinion. Celeste's original medical record had been altered. Incomplete data had been distributed as final, and the people responsible had benefited from her dependence. The newspapers that had called her unstable issued corrections in smaller type than the accusations. Celeste noticed. She did not waste time demanding equal space. Instead, she announced that North Star would withdraw from the Kestrel merger and fund an independent program to help patients obtain original diagnostic data, amendments, and equipment validation notices. She named the program First Page. The name came from Piper, because that's where the wrong story started, the child explained at the first planning meeting. So people should get the real first page. Celeste wrote it at the top of a legal pad. The first page would not promise cures. It would not tell patients to distrust physicians or replace medical judgment with internet suspicion. Its purpose was narrower and more useful. Make original records visible, preserve raw data, disclose known equipment corrections, and prevent one summary from becoming an unquestioned inheritance. Jonah joined the planning team as Director of Systems Integrity after refusing the first 3 titles Celeste offered him. Vice President sounds expensive, he said. It is. It also sounds like meetings. There will be meetings regardless. Then call me the person who checks whether the machine and the paper agree. Celeste looked at him across the library table. That will not fit on a business card. Good. I don't want business cards. She made him director anyway. He continued taking restoration jobs for several months, because leaving them immediately felt like abandoning the life that had carried Piper and him through grief. Celeste did not press. She had learned that offering someone a future did not give her the right to remove his past. Piper became a regular presence at Greystone House. She did homework in the library, ate grilled cheese with the kitchen staff, and corrected executives who called First Page a branding initiative. It's a true thing, she told them. The blue star remained in the therapy room window. Celeste began rehabilitation in January. The first sessions were not cinematic. There was no sudden movement, no room of astonished specialists, no music rising beneath a miracle. There were measurements, pain, fatigue, and long periods in which nothing visible happened. Muscles unused for decades did not respond to revelation. Joints had changed. Bone density had changed. The nervous system carried old injury and old adaptation together. The team spoke in probabilities and conditions. Celeste demanded numbers. They gave ranges. She demanded timelines. They gave milestones. She hated them for refusing certainty and trusted them because they did. Jonah attended only when invited. The first time, he stood near the door, while two therapists helped Celeste work at the parallel bars. She wore braces at both knees and a support belt at her waist. Her hands gripped the rails. Her shoulders shook before her legs carried any measurable load. "Do not look impressed," she said through clenched teeth. "I'm looking at the left brace. What's wrong with it?" "The hinge is 3 millimeters off your knee axis." The therapist checked and adjusted it. Celeste looked at Jonah. "You could have said I was doing well. Would you have believed me?" "No." Then the hinge was more useful. She almost smiled. After the session, her hands trembled so badly she could not close the impasse lid. Jonah sat beside her and waited. "I hate needing help after I chose this," she said. "Choosing hard work doesn't make every part of it pleasant. You always have a sentence. Most of them are stolen from mistakes." She handed him the compass. "Close it." He did. That small request mattered more than grand declarations would have. Celeste did not need him because she could do nothing. She trusted him with the things she no longer needed to prove she could do alone. In February, the medical team recommended a decompression procedure intended to reduce scar-related pressure around preserved pathways. The surgeons were explicit. The operation might improve signal quality, might change nothing, and carried real risks. Celeste read every consent page. Then she read the original studies again. Gideon's old sentence returned to her. Truth is not the same as recovery. He had meant it as a curse. It became permission. She chose the surgery because the choice was finally hers. The night before, Jonah found her in the hospital room turning the brass compass in her hands. Piper had drawn a new star and taped it to the wall. It read, "Choice counts too. She is becoming difficult to live with." Jonah said, "She learned from you." He sat in the chair beside the bed. "You don't have to stay," Celeste said. "I know. Piper is with Mistress Delgado and has called twice to make sure I am not pretending hospital coffee is dinner." Celeste looked toward the dark window. "My father spent his last night trying to return my choice. Yes, I used to think if I ever learned he had not abandoned me, it would fix something. Did it? It broke something first?" Jonah nodded. "Truth often has to move the old structure before it can carry weight." "Is that another building sentence?" "Everything becomes a building sentence if you work long enough." She looked at him. "And Hannah, did the truth about the machine help?" Jonah's eyes dropped to his hands. "It helped other families. It did not give Piper her mother back. For a while, I hated that. I thought justice was supposed to feel larger. Then one day Piper asked why I still touched Hannah's picture every time I came home. I told her it was to remember. She said I already remembered. She was right. I touched it because part of me was still asking permission to keep living." Celeste listened without interrupting. "Did you get permission? Not from the picture." "From whom?" He looked at her. The answer remained unspoken, but not unclear. Celeste reached across the bed. Jonah took her hand. "I do not know what tomorrow changes," she said. "Neither do I. Stay anyway." "I will." The surgery lasted 4 hours. It did not produce a miracle by morning. Celeste woke in pain, furious at the weakness in her voice, and immediately asked for the operative report. The surgeon told her preserved tissue had been found where the falsified summary described complete destruction. Pressure had been relieved. What that meant functionally would take months to learn. For 3 weeks, the answer seemed to be very little. Then one afternoon, during a supported exercise, Celeste moved her left foot 2 centimeters on command. The therapist asked her to stop, rest, and try again. She did. The foot moved less the second time, more the third. Celeste stared at it. No one cheered. The therapist recorded the response. The physician repeated the test. Jonah stood against the wall with both hands in his pockets, because if he moved, he feared he would make the moment belong to him. Celeste looked up. You saw it? Yes. Say something useful. He swallowed. The brace hinges fine. She laughed and cried at the same time. It was 2 centimeters. It was everything and not enough. Progress did not continue in a straight line. Some weeks brought stronger signals. Others brought spasms, pain, and exhaustion. In April, Celeste developed an infection that paused therapy and threatened the gains she had made. She spent 12 days in the hospital and another month rebuilding strength she had already fought to earn. The setback nearly ended the experiment. On the third day home, she told Jonah to remove the parallel bars from Greystone House. No, he said. They were in the therapy room. Rain pressed against the windows. Celeste's face was pale with fatigue. I am not asking for your opinion. Then hire someone else. You work for me. Not as your contractor. Everything becomes a principle with you. Only when you try to turn pain into an order. Her voice rose. I lost 6 weeks. Yes. The signal is weaker. Yes. The doctors say recovery may plateau. Yes. Then what exactly are you refusing to understand? Jonah stepped closer. That stopping is your choice. But erasing the room so you can pretend you never chose is not the same thing. Leave the bars for a month. If you still want them gone, I'll remove them myself. Celeste looked toward the window. The old paper snowflake and Piper's blue star had faded in the spring light. You think refusal is always noble, she said. No, sometimes quitting is honest. Sometimes staying is fear. I don't know which this is. That's why I'm asking you not to make a permanent decision on the worst day. She hated him for being right enough to slow her down. The bars stayed. 3 weeks later, she returned to them. By summer, Celeste could activate muscles in both legs with concentration. By autumn, she could bear part of her weight in braces for short intervals. Her physicians continued to warn that independent walking might never be realistic. She accepted the warning without accepting it as a command. First page grew faster than anyone expected. Hospitals joined because the program reduced disputes. Equipment manufacturers joined because transparent correction notices were safer than hidden liability. Patient advocates joined because the platform gave people access without telling them what conclusions to draw. Jonah designed a verification system that linked summaries to original data, amendments, and device notices. He insisted every screen show who changed a record, when, and why. Celeste insisted the system remain free for patients. They argued about budgets, security, staffing, and whether his old truck was an unacceptable risk to company parking. It passed inspection, he said. It leaks something. Condensation. It leaves condensation with an oil sheen. The mirror is fixed, with a different color housing. You are judging it cosmetically. I am judging it as a machine that carries 2 people I care about. The room went quiet. Jonah looked at her. Celeste had not meant to say it so plainly. She turned back to the budget screen. The transportation allowance is approved, she said. I don't want a company car. Then buy a less alarming truck. Piper likes this one. From the library sofa, Piper looked up from her homework. I like Miss Avery more. Celeste covered a smile with one hand. Jonah bought a used truck the next week. He kept the old one in storage. The first public launch of First Page was scheduled for the following December at Greystone House, 1 year after Jonah had found the mismatched film. The board wanted a hotel ballroom. Celeste chose the mansion because the truth had begun in its walls. The old therapy room became a small exhibit on record integrity. The cabinet remained. The film envelopes were displayed behind glass, with private details covered. Thomas Avery's letter stayed with Celeste. On the morning of the launch, Snow returned. Piper, now 8, arrived wearing a navy dress and carrying a box of paper stars made by children from 3 patient support groups. Jonah wore a new suit that fit properly. Celeste wore deep green and the brass compass at her waist. The guest list included physicians, engineers, patient advocates, North Star employees, and several people whose records had been corrected through the pilot program. Evelyn Cross attended using her wall-licking frame. She and Celeste met in the library without cameras. "You look like him," Evelyn said after studying the portrait of Thomas Avery. "People usually say, 'I look like my mother.' Not your face? The way you wait before you answer?" Celeste looked at the older woman. "I wish we had found you sooner. We found each other while we're still here. Don't make late truth carry the burden of being early." Celeste remembered the sentence. At 3, the launch began in the winter garden beside the repaired elevator. Jonah stood near the back with Piper. Celeste spoke from the front, seated as she had been for every major address of her career. She told the audience that First Page existed because expertise deserved accurate foundations. She praised the specialists who had agreed to reevaluate her case and refused to turn the story into an attack on medicine. "Systems failed when errors became invisible," she said, "and people failed when authority mattered more than correction." Then she looked toward Jonah. 1 year ago, a building contractor noticed that a number on a film did not match a number on an envelope. He did not diagnose me. He did not promise me recovery. He asked why the original and the summary disagreed. That question exposed a lie in one day, because the lie had been waiting 30 years for someone who would not be embarrassed into silence. The audience was quiet. Celeste's hands moved to the chair rims. 2 therapists stepped into position beside a set of discrete support rails built into the front platform. Jonah had helped install them, but he did not know whether she intended to use them that day. Piper grabbed his hand. Celeste lugged the chair. She placed both hands on the rails and leaned forward. Her braces held. Her arms worked. Her legs answered slowly, imperfectly, and enough. She rose, not alone, not without support, not as proof that every injured body could do the same. She rose because her body, after 30 years and 1 year of difficult work, could carry part of her weight for that moment. The room inhaled. Celeste stood for 31 seconds. At 12, her left knee trembled. At 19, a therapist shifted closer. At 26, Jonah started counting without sound. At 31, Celeste lowered herself safely into the chair. The applause came then, but she raised one hand. "This is not the purpose of First Page," she said, breathing hard. "Some people will receive corrected records and never stand. Some will learn the first diagnosis was right. Some will find a different treatment. Some will find only the dignity of knowing the truth was not withheld. That is enough reason to build this." The applause returned, quieter and deeper. Piper ran forward after the speech and wrapped her arms around Celeste. Jonah approached more slowly. 31 seconds, he said. "You counted." "I checked the support rail first." "Of course you did." Her face was bright with exertion and something calmer than victory. "Walk with me," she said. Jonah glanced at the chair. Celeste smiled figuratively for now. They moved through the winter garden side by side. Jonah walking, Celeste rolling, Piper between them holding one hand from each. At the library doors, Piper stopped. "Are we a family now?" Jonah closed his eyes briefly. Celeste looked at the child, then at the man, who had never treated her damage as the most interesting thing about her. "Families usually take longer than one question," Celeste said. Piper frowned. "We've been doing this for a year." Jonah laughed. Celeste reached for his hand. "Then yes," she said, "we are becoming one." They did not become a family in the clean way stories often pretend people do. There was no single dinner, after which Jonah moved into Greystone House, and every empty room filled with warmth. There were conversations about schools, privacy, money, grief, and the imbalance created when one person owned a mansion, and the other still compared grocery prices by the hour. Jonah worried that Piper would confuse luxury with safety. Celeste worried that offering help would sound like ownership. Piper worried mainly that Greystone's kitchen made vegetables in ways that looked expensive, but still tasted like vegetables. They learned slowly. Jonah kept his apartment for another year. Celeste visited it often enough that Mistress Delgado stopped pretending not to watch through the curtain. She sat at Jonah's small kitchen table, where her chair barely cleared the refrigerator door, and ate soup from bowls that did not match. The first time the building elevator failed, Jonah carried his tools downstairs while Celeste waited inside the apartment and refused to call a company helicopter. "This is what normal people do," she said when he returned. "Normal people complain more. I complained to 3 executives while you were gone. Then you're adapting." At Greystone, Piper chose a bedroom near the old therapy room but continued sleeping at the apartment on school nights. She placed Hannah's beach photograph on one shelf and Thomas Avery's picture on another. Celeste did not ask her to remove either. A found family was not built by replacing the dead. It was built by making room for the love that had survived them. First Page expanded to 12 states, then nationally. Its most important successes rarely made news. A woman discovered that a medication reaction had been omitted from a transferred chart. A retired mechanic obtained raw cardiac data that led his new physician to repeat a test. A child with a rare disorder received an amended lab report before years of treatment were built on the wrong assumption. In many cases, the original diagnosis remained unchanged. The value was not always a reversal. Sometimes it was confidence earned honestly. Jonah insisted that every first-page training begin with the same warning. Records are tools, not verdicts, and corrected information still requires qualified medical interpretation. Celeste insisted that every patient receive the original file without having to prove why they wanted it. People should not need permission to see the evidence used to describe their own lives, she said. The sentence became the program's principle. Gideon's case moved through courts and committees. He was eventually charged with fraud, obstruction, and breach of fiduciary duty. Some allegations could not be proved after so many years. Others could. He accepted an agreement that removed him permanently from trust management and required restitution to the affected families. The punishment felt smaller than the years taken. Celeste expected to feel cheated by that. Instead, she felt finished with measuring her life against his consequences. One evening, Irene asked whether Celeste wanted the portrait of Gideon removed from the North Star Founders Gallery. "Leave the date of his service," Celeste said. "Add the date the board removed him. Records should show corrections, not pretend the error never existed." That was how she chose to remember him. Not erased, amended. Her physical progress continued in uneven increments. She learned to stand with less upper body support. She took several assisted steps between parallel bars. Outside therapy, she used her wheelchair because it remained the fastest and most reliable way to move through the world. People sometimes asked when she would walk full-time, as if recovery were a staircase with only one acceptable top. Celeste stopped answering the question. Her body was not a public referendum. At the second anniversary of First Page, she crossed the therapy room with braces, a walker, and Jonah beside her. Piper waited at the far end, holding the brass compass. It took 6 minutes. No cameras recorded it. When Celeste reached the window, she sat and opened the compass compartment. Her father's letter had grown soft along the fold. She removed it, read the first line, and gave the compass to Piper. "This was my father's," she said. Piper helped. "Do it carefully. Am I supposed to keep it?" "For a while. What if I lose it? Then you will learn an expensive lesson about pockets." Piper smiled, then became serious. "Why me?" Celeste looked at the paper stars in the window. The original snowflake had become too fragile to hang, so it rested inside a clear frame. Piper's first blue star remained beside it, faded but intact. "Because a compass is useful before you think you need one," Celeste said. "And because you reminded me that 20 copies of the same answer are not 20 truths." Piper opened the lid. The needle swung, trembled, and settled. "Does it always know?" "No," Jonah said from the doorway. "Magnets confuse it. Metal can pull it off course. You have to notice what is around you. Celeste looked at him. You cannot allow one sentimental moment without a calibration warning. That is why you hired me. It is not why I kept you. Piper made the face she used when adults were approaching a conversation she considered overdue. Are you getting married or not? Jonah looked at Celeste. Your daughter has inherited your negotiation style. Your daughter, Celeste corrected. The words settled warmly. They married the following spring, in the winter garden, because the room had been where Jonah first disagreed with her, and where she had first decided not to send him away. There were no reporters. North Star directors were invited only if they had learned to speak to Piper like a person. Evelyn Cross attended. Owen Park brought a framed copy of the equipment validation log, which Celeste called the least romantic wedding gift in history, and Jonah called technically excellent. Piper carried the rings and the brass compass case. Celeste entered in her wheelchair and stood for the vows with braces, and Jonah's hands beneath hers, not because standing made the promise more valid, but because she wanted to. Halfway through, her legs trembled. Sit, Jonah whispered. Not yet. This is the part where I refuse to let you make a point at the expense of your knees. And this is the part where you remember, they are my knees. The guests laughed softly. Celeste sat. They completed the vows at eye level. Later, Piper asked whether that meant the story was over. No, Jonah said. It means the paperwork is official. Celeste touched the child's hair. Stories do not end when people belong to each other. That is usually where the daily work begins. The work was ordinary and therefore precious. School mornings, board meetings, therapy sessions, burned toast, repairs, arguments followed by apologies that did not include the word but. Jonah learning that Celeste's silence did not always mean anger. Celeste learning that his need to solve a problem sometimes concealed fear. Piper growing tall enough to stop using the red lunchbox and refusing to let Jonah throw it away. The old truck remained in storage until Piper turned 16. Jonah restored it with her over 2 summers. When the engine finally started, the sound filled the workshop with the same uneven rattle that had once carried them. Through Greystone's gates, Celeste stood beside the workbench, using a cane for balance over short distances. She looked at the mismatched mirror housing and shook her head. You restored the entire vehicle and kept that? Piper grinned. It's part of the record. Jonah wiped his hands on a cloth. Corrections should be visible. Celeste laughed. The truck had not changed her life. The films had not changed it alone. The surgery had not changed it alone. Even the truth, powerful as it was, did not arrive like a door opening onto a completely different world. Life changed because one question led to another, and because the people asking them stayed. 20 specialists had not failed because they lacked intelligence or care. Most had examined Celeste honestly. They failed because a corrupted first record was treated as settled ground, and because systems often reward agreement more readily than examination. Gideon exploited that weakness. The years made it heavier. Authority made it quieter. Jonah's gift was not that he knew more than the specialists. He knew where not to pretend certainty. He saw a mismatched number and admitted it meant he did not know. He saw a possible movement and refused to call it either a miracle or nothing. He found a hidden room and understood that sealed doors do not erase the current behind them. Celeste's courage was not standing for 31 seconds. It was opening the file when the truth could only hurt before it helped. It was choosing surgery without demanding a promise. It was returning to the parallel bars after the infection, then using her chair without apology when the chair served her better. It was allowing love into a life she had made complete alone, not because she needed rescue, but because completeness and belonging are not opposites. And Piper's wisdom was the simplest of all. Maybe mattered, not as false hope, not as a guarantee, as room for the next honest question. Years later, the paper snowflake and blue star still rested together in the therapy room window. Beneath them sat the photograph of 14-year-old Celeste between the parallel bars. The caption did not say before. It did not say tragedy. It did not say miracle. It showed only her name, the date, and a line from Thomas Avery's letter. I will not let my fear become your limit. That was the truth Jonah helped return to her, not a promise that every loss could be reversed, not a claim that love could repair a spinal cord or restore 30 stolen years. Something quieter. A person is more than the summary others keep copying. Dignity does not begin when the body changes. Family is not the reward for becoming easier to love. And sometimes the most important thing one human being can do for another is refuse to look away when the numbers do not match. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who has ever been told that asking one more honest question was foolish. And in the comments, tell me what true north means in your life.